Is MrBeast the worst boss ever? MrBeast has been accused of fostering a toxic work environment by former employees, former contestants, and potential employees. Reports include allegations of bullying, workplace harassment, demanding perfectionism, and even some ex-employees describe the workplace as absolutely toxic. These allegations have been concerns over MrBeast's public persona and business practices, as videos with accusations of everything from a hostile work environment to racism, even sexism. The ongoing scrutiny raises questions about the ethical business practices when social media influencers become business entities.
There's no stopping me now. I know my shot should sit down. Money's all over me. I'm called to be rich and be free.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. I am Ebony Evaughn, your go-to business operations manager, here to help you grow your business through people and processes. In today's video, I am weighing in on the MrBeast controversy, and typically I try to avoid getting into content in the commentary space because it's not necessarily my lane. I don't like the energy that it can bring to your channel and the conflict that often arises in the chat and things like that. But because MrBeast is not only a YouTube channel, he's the biggest YouTube channel out there, he has also transformed himself, his name and his company into a business enterprise, and that's kind of my lane. So I do want to weigh in on this topic from a business perspective because I feel like it could really add some valuable insight into some things that MrBeast and his team have done really wrong, and some also learning lessons that we can all learn from this, whether you're social media content creators, influencers, or entrepreneurs. How I want to structure this video is, first we're going to get into a very high level of the allegations that are out there against MrBeast, and then I want to weigh in from a business manager perspective and a former HR manager perspective, someone who has education and a work background in human resources, and really weigh in on some of the allegations when it comes to having a toxic work environment, and then how to identify those signs, what causes a toxic workplace environment, and then also my advice for where I think MrBeast went wrong, and also what I think he should do going forward. Okay, so just a little bit about my background. Before I started a YouTube channel, I honestly had never heard of MrBeast before, and then once I started my YouTube channel and I hired like YouTube strategists, consultants, I hired a YouTube manager to help me manage different tasks on my YouTube channel. Every single time I interviewed someone with helping me with my YouTube channel, I hired a YouTube manager, everyone would be like, oh, you have to create thumbnails like MrBeast, or MrBeast, like he scripts his videos like this, MrBeast editing styles like this. And I was like, who is this MrBeast guy? Like, why is everyone so fascinated with him? And that was kind of like my first introduction. Everyone talked about how he is the largest YouTube content creator, I believe, to date that exists, with over 300 million subscribers. So a lot of people look at MrBeast as the blueprint for how to grow on YouTube, how to turn your YouTube channel from just being a content machine into an actual business entity. And for myself, someone who is in the entrepreneur space, like I said, I have a background in human resources. I worked in the corporate world way before I got into entrepreneurship. I've been in the world of entrepreneurship for 10 years now at this point. I was 6 years into my business when I started a YouTube channel. I always looked at YouTube differently. So editing like MrBeast, creating thumbnails like MrBeast didn't make sense for me, because I always was like, well, his videos, his thumbnails, his editing style works for him because he is targeting children. If you're targeting children, yeah, you want to have animated thumbnails, you want to have them look very cartoonish, you know, and bright, vibrant colors. Yeah, you're going to have these overstimulating sound effects and edit cuts because of the target audience that you have. And I'm like, I create content for educated entrepreneurs, so that type of editing, thumbnail design doesn't make sense for my business because I'm using a different audience. And I will always have to explain that to, you know, my YouTube manager, etc. So that was pretty much kind of like the only thing I knew about MrBeast. Every now and then he would come up in different controversies and I'd be like, okay, that's cool. Obviously, if you're on YouTube, you constantly see other creators trying to follow the MrBeast blueprint with doing like the competitions, handing out money and things, trying to grow their channel. And I always thought that that was pretty weird, but pretty much that is the gist of my introduction and what I know about MrBeast. So I do have a very limited knowledge, but even with my limited knowledge about MrBeast, I do feel like I can speak on this topic from a business perspective as someone who has been in the world of entrepreneurship for over 10 years, who has a master's degree in human resources and came from working in HR in a corporate setting. So with all of that, let's get into the actual allegations that exist. So how I first came across this topic was the videos from 𝗥𝗘𝗦𝗢𝗡. In the first video, he got into allegations of MrBeast's business practices, the illegal lotteries that he did, who he employed on his team. And one of the things that really stuck out to me in that first video was, number one, just the illegal lotteries and business practices that MrBeast had early on in his business. And this is something that is, I don't want to say expected, but this is something that has been normalized when it comes to the entrepreneurship world. With there being a low barrier to entry, anyone can decide to wake up one day and become an entrepreneur. You have people who go from just being a regular, degular, smegular person one day, and then the next day they're thrust into the spotlight because of one viral video, and now they're no longer just a content creator, but now this becomes a business for them, and they want to capitalize on the virality that they have. They want to know how they can monetize it. And so you have people that end up getting thrust into being a business without having any type of business experience or business knowledge. And of my understanding, I believe that's what happened to MrBeast. One day he's just a regular kid playing video games, and then all of a sudden, you know, he blew up, and now he's trying to turn this into a business by any means necessary, which isn't always the right way to go about doing it, right? That's why I became a business operations manager in the first place, because this isn't something that's isolated just to MrBeast. This is something that a lot of content creators, social media influencers, entrepreneurs end up facing within their entrepreneurial journey. Now, with that being said, I'm not surprised about the illegal lotteries, because most people don't know what they don't know, and so they just do things, and they typically learn through trial and error or in lawsuits and things like that. But you really should have an HR department. You should have business lawyers on your team to help you from getting into those situations. So something else that 𝗥𝗘𝗦𝗢𝗡 pointed out in his video is who MrBeast has hired on his team. And this is one of the first things that I want to speak on from a human resources perspective. And I first want to say, number one, that when it comes to hiring someone who is a RSO, I'm trying to use YouTube friendly words, right? When it comes to hiring someone, there are a lot of companies who will hire felons, who will hire people who have some type of documented criminal history, and that's okay. Companies are allowed to do that. But where it becomes problematic with MrBeast and his entity is because of the fact that his content, his target market and audience is dealing with the children. So if you know that your target audience is children, then you should be protecting your audience at all costs, and you should not be hiring RSOs. And if you are going to hire RSOs on your staff, then they need to be way in the back, where they will have absolutely no contact at all with the children at any point. Even if that person is in a position where they have to go on set, then that person should not be allowed to be a RSO in any capacity, shape, or form. Now, that's all I want to say about that, because I know there's so many allegations out there, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm minimizing that, but there's so many other things when it comes to the workplace environment that I want to highlight in this video that I can't just go as deep on every single topic as I want to, okay? So now I want to go and move on to the second video that that 𝗥𝗘𝗦𝗢𝗡 put out. And this is the video where he interviews, I keep calling him Jake from MrBeast because I'm like trying to remember his name and it makes me think it's like Jake from Steak Farm, but no, Jake from MrBeast, okay? And basically in his interview, he details his experience working with MrBeast. He talks about his time when he was there up until when he was terminated, and then eventually when MrBeast contacted him, you know, a couple years later to come back and do another video. And this is something that I want to spend a lot of time talking about in this video, but first I want to show you this clip just to give you a little bit of context.
But when my friends do it, it's fine. In 2 weeks, it wasn't my friend. He was my boss. And that wasn't cool. And so now, I'm locked in a cage at his whim. And I have to do things to get the cash I need to live. And I got these cameras on me all the time. I wanted to be a good sport, and I wanted to get the boost, and I wanted the cash, and so I started running at 12. I was able to take some breaks, and I asked him, how long do I have? He goes, until I get back. And I'm running until 3 a.m. And I got off the treadmill. Oh, the blisters I had on my feet were like, you wouldn't believe. Just all over, just these big red. I couldn't walk. My muscles were like just the lactic acid. I got off the treadmill, and then the people that came in to like ice my feet, make sure I was good. Then that's when I was like, I'm done. I can't. I'm done. I'm out. I'm out. And that's when I get psych in and talk to psych about how I'm not well. And like I said, there was a lot of good people over there that was saying, you got to pull him out. Yeah, I had friends that did some freelance work. And they would tell me, they'd be like, yeah, everyone knows you over there. Everybody loves you. They go, oh, Jake Weddle, love that guy. Shame what happened to him. Like I'm a ghost. And I asked him, I said, how much longer are you guys going to keep me in here? And the guy goes, realistically, like at least 7 more days? No. And they didn't let me leave right away either. They wanted to make sure, everything was fine. So I just, slept for a while. They turned the lights off. And they brought it on my friends, to make it.
So in this clip, you can see that Jake is clearly dealing with a lot of emotional turmoil still to this day and PTSD when it comes to his experience with working with MrBeast. And so I really want to highlight signs that you are in a toxic work environment. So when I'm listening to Jake really recount his story, it is so clear to me that this work environment was detrimental to not only his emotional and mental well-being, but physical as well. A lot of the signs of a toxic workplace you can visibly see even in Jake retelling his. So you can see the signs of the constant burnout and stress that he was dealing with, the negative atmosphere that he was in, being fearful of speaking up. And we're going to talk about that in a separate clip, right? When he actually advocated for himself for a raise. We'll get into that in a second. You also see clear signs that there was unfair treatment and favoritism that was clearly going on in MrBeast's entity. I don't know, what is the name of his company? I'm just going to call it MrBeast entity. Sorry, MrBeast. Actually, I'm not sorry. But you can see that there were clear signs of a hostile work environment just from him retelling the story and just how much it impacted his emotional and physical well-being even to this day. Also following this, you also have in the 𝗥𝗘𝗦𝗢𝗡 video where Jake talks about ultimately being terminated from the MrBeast incorporation, right? And so I really want to highlight a couple things about this clip.
If I was working on a TV show in the 90s, on a show that was a quarter as successful, I could retire today. But now I make dog shit pay, making gajillionaires more money. And I talked about that, and I talked about the Writers Guild and how this is what Writers Guild industry standard is for the streaming internet content with ads. I thought that was the closest thing to YouTube, and I didn't even bring up residuals because, oh my God, if I got residuals for every video I worked on, boy, howdy, I could retire. But
all right, so there you see Jake telling his story when he was actually fired because he decided to speak up for himself and advocate for more money. Now, this can go a couple different ways. So I'm definitely not advocating for MrBeast in any way, but I do want to say that when it comes to the world of entrepreneurship, and particularly when it comes to social media, YouTube, Instagram, especially vlogging channels and things like that, it is not regulated as much as it should be. You can probably recall a couple months ago, I think Illinois and another state recently passed laws for family vloggers for conditions that have to be met met when it comes to having your kid in your content, but this is something that is fairly new when it comes to regulating the social media world. Now, previously, you would have regulations for media and entertainment through different employment laws that relate to like movie sets and the entertainment space, Hollywood. So you have the Writers Guild, we have the Actors Guild, Directors Guild, things like that. And we saw last year, was that last year? I don't know, like ever since 2020, all these years just blend together for me. Like something could have been 3 years ago, and to me it feels like it was 6 months ago. But we saw the writer's strike, we saw the actor's strike, and a big component of that was the fact that they wanted to advocate for themselves. Now that you have these digital streaming platforms, hey, I should be getting residuals when I write for a show and it goes on Netflix. I should be getting paid if you're going to use my likeness to create AI characters, so you don't have to pay me, right? And when it comes to regulating the YouTube space, there's not really a lot of guidance out there, but I do think you will see more of that forthcoming within the next few, I would say, months and years, especially after situations like this, because the online space, the social media space, really isn't regulated much at all. But with that being said, when it comes to how you're treating your employees on set, that is something that there shouldn't have to be a law or a rule to tell you how to treat people nicely. It should just be something that you do just because you want to take care of people and you want to treat people good, especially when you position your brand as someone who is very philanthropic and you're giving back to the community and you're doing all these things for people's good, right? You would just expect there to be a certain level of treatment and respect there for people as human beings.
The other thing I talked about was there was another writer there, older comic, black guy. He had a kid, and I got paid more than him, and I thought that was wild because he was older than me and a child. We're doing the exact same job, and I'm some 20-year-old fucking white guy. I'm gonna get paid more than him. I brought that up, and one of the things I didn't like about the way some of the V stuff shook out. Yeah, I was talking to this other writer, like, it's fucked up, that's how the pay is, and I want you to get paid more, because you deserve to get paid more. I'm not a kid. And he didn't want to rock the boat. He desperately didn't want to rock the boat. He's just, I like my job. I like my job because when you grow up with nothing, not to say that he did, but I know I did. You get a little something, you don't want to lose it, so he didn't want to rock the boat. But he said, "Hey man, if that's how you feel, like if that's like, I trust you." He stood with me. You went to that meeting with me, and I said it in my piece, and you backed me up. I said, "I need XYZ or I'm out of here." And they said, "Bet," and they gave me a severance check the next day, and they gave him a severance check the next day. And if I knew he was going to lose his job too, I wouldn't have done it.
Besides that, what I really want to touch on from this clip of Jake talking about his experience being terminated is he also talks about how when he wanted to go advocate to get paid more, to get residuals, fair pay, he also talked about it to another employee who was a black man, a little bit older than him. And so they went together, and the guy went with him in support to back him up about, you should get more money, right? And I've seen a lot of people kind of minimize this as like, it's not that big deal. Who cares if it was a black guy? Why does that matter? And it matters for a whole lot of reasons. When it comes to any workplace, whether it's in the world of entrepreneurship, if it's a corporate entity, especially in private entities, typically you have some type of pay disparity between men and women solely based on their gender. They have the same work experience, the same educational background, they're doing the same job, but white men typically are going to be paid more than a white woman, right? When it comes to introducing race in the workplace, typically a white male is going to be paid more than a black male, right? This is something that is statistically documented. We know this has been a problem in the United States since the United States has been the United States. This is not anything new. And I do believe that we need to have more open and honest conversations about the wealth gap and the pay gap that exists just between people based on their race, their gender, their sexual preference, or whatever it is. So these are important conversations to have, regardless how uncomfortable it may be. And I also want to say that based on the information that is presented in 𝗥𝗘𝗦𝗢𝗡's video, is not enough information to say, yeah, this is racial discrimination or whatever. When it comes to legal claims for discrimination, it's not about what actually happened. It's about what you can prove. So you have to have documentation there to back up the claims that you are making and evidence to support the claims that you have. So I'm not saying that this is a situation where it could just be that there is racial discrimination or anything like that, but it is definitely something to look into, and that I think people should look across the entire MrBeast brand. How many people are women that work there? How many people are people of color? What does the pay look like for each employee based on their gender, based on their position? Do you have it where all the people of color work in a certain department, right, and they're separate from everyone else? Those are some things that I would want to know to be able to make a better decision on whether I think there is any type of discrimination going on. But based on the stories that are out there, based on the news articles, we can definitely assume that there is a hostile work environment. And last but not least, when it comes to the recent allegations, one more thing that I want to mention is this video by 𝗩𝗘𝗦𝗢𝗡 where he talks about MrBeast stealing his ideas and MrBeast and team flying him out. Listen, I'm here for getting flued out for jobs, okay? Somebody go ahead and fly me out. I am ready, okay? So when it comes to the 𝗩𝗘𝗦𝗢𝗡 video, basically I'll put in a clip, but I'm going to summarize it for you. He talks about receiving some type of communication from MrBeast and team saying, hey, we want you to come out, potentially work for us. We're going to give you a test assignment to see how you do, consider you for a job opportunity. He goes out, he gives them this brilliant idea that later becomes a video, but then they decide not to hire him.
Hello, Ty. We would like for you to come in for a vibe check. Are you able to fly in on Tuesday, be on office Wednesday through Friday, and fly back out on Saturday morning? Of course, I said yes, and she gave me all my travel info. This is what I pitched to Hoodie. This is what I pitched to Hoodie. An obstacle course in the air, but like somehow incorporate it with the Mario idea. Somehow just, I don't know, somehow do that. So after all that, I'm feeling great. I got a verbal confirmation that I was good to go. Everything was perfect. I can talk about everything was literally perfect until I got home. And that's when everything started to happen. Unfortunately, we have decided not to move forward with your candidacy at this time. We really appreciate you coming out and vibing with us. We would consider you for a role like this in the future, but timing isn't quite right. And the rest are about receipts. But I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything at all. Not a single word until I saw this on Twitter. Just uploaded the most insane video we've ever done. Go watch. Take a look at this picture. Take a good hard look at this picture. Does that remind you of anything you've seen so far? Does it remind you of anything you've seen remotely close to it? Or does it look like the exact same thing that I drew? The exact same thing that I pitched? Everything. Do you want to know how much I got paid for that? Zero. I didn't get paid a single dime.
And so I do want to say I watched that video. I believe I even left a comment on the video. From an HR perspective, you not hiring someone or not paying them for coming out and contributing to any job role or to a specific project is not illegal, right? And I know when we think about the situation, it's not illegal, but it can seem unethical because you want to be paid for your worth. But from an HR perspective, it's not illegal if you were compensated in other ways. And so what I mean by this, based on the information that Ty presented in his video, he clearly shared that he was compensated because MrBeast and team covered his lodging, they covered his flights. I'm not for sure if they covered his dog kennel expenses or not, but he did mention having receipts for that in his video. So if MrBeast did in fact reimburse him for his lodging, his flights, his dog's stay in the kennel, then that in itself is also considered compensation. Even though it wasn't a monetary value, they didn't say, hey, we're going to give you $2,000 for the work you did over these 3 days or however many days it was. They paid him by paying for his lodging, paying for his meals, accommodations, the dog kennel. That is still considered compensation. Now, where I can say I had a couple of red flags and I was like, I would love to know some more information about this, is the fact that he said that there were no positions that were vacant, but yet there seemed to be a kind of revolving door of these potential hires coming in. So I would definitely want to know more information about, hey, why do you have this continuous stream of potential job applicants coming in if you don't have any vacant positions? Like, in that case, it does seem like there may be something fishy going on where you're using people to get fresh content ideas without having to compensate them monetarily, without having to pay them as employees and offer them benefits, you know, salaries, insurance, and all those things. It could be trying to get away with that. Now, I'm not saying that that is what the MrBeast brand is doing, but that is something that caught my eye from an HR perspective. All right, so now that we've kind of talked about all the allegations and the video clips that are out there, I really want to transition into how being in a toxic work environment can impact employees. And then I'm going to talk about what I think caused this toxic work environment for the Beast brand and what I think MrBeast should do going forward. So before I get into exactly what I think created this work environment for the Beast brand, I want to just talk about a toxic work environment and how it can impact you in general, because even if you're not working for MrBeast, you're working for some other corporation, another social media influencer or entrepreneur, or what, maybe you're an entrepreneur and you're hiring people, you're building a team, then it is important to pay attention to the company culture that you create. Even me, before I became an entrepreneur, I worked in the corporate world, and I used to get what I called the Sunday syndrome. And so basically I called it Sunday syndrome because I would find myself being in a space where, you know, I worked a traditional corporate job. You work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, you're off on the weekends. And I would notice that Friday at around 4 o'clock, I would be so ecstatic, so happy. Oh my God, freedom, it's the weekend. Yeah, to the weekend, right? I would be so excited, happy the weekend is there. But then when Sunday would roll around like 6 p.m., 7 p.m. on Sunday, like I would start to get this nauseous, groggy feeling. And I started to realize, like, I get this feeling on Sundays because I would be dreading having to go back to my job on Monday morning. Like, I would know, man, it's the last day of the weekend. I'm going to go have to deal with these stupid people tomorrow. I'm going to have to go deal with like these petty baddies in the workplace. This stupid boss that walks around with the mug, always asking, how's it going? Why? Stupid meetings that could have been emails. I just don't want to have to deal with these people, right? And so I call that the Sunday syndrome because I would notice I would get this feeling all the time on Sunday nights when I know that, okay, tomorrow is going back to the workplace and I have to do this for another 5 days, and then I get another taste of freedom, right? And this is something that is not unique to me. It's not unique to MrBeast employees and contractors. This is something that a lot of people experience in the workplace. And this is unhealthy. When you're in a hostile work environment, when you're in a toxic work environment, it can be detrimental to your health and well-being. It can physically make you sick. It can make you have stress, headaches. It can make you have an upset stomach, and it can also lead to disease. Like, there are studies, documented studies, that highlight how being in a hostile or toxic work environment can lead to illnesses like high blood pressure and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those signs that you're in a toxic work environment and do things to alleviate them, because the impact of being in a toxic work environment can have so many ramifications on you as an employee. You can end up dealing with stress, burnout, anxiety, depression. It can end up diminishing your self-esteem or your morale when it comes to going to work and doing a good job. And that impact then impacts your employee performance, right? And so dealing with a hostile work environment is not something that should be taken lightly. And it's something that if you find yourself in that situation, you need to make sure that you're doing things to get yourself out of it, whether it's reporting things to HR. I could do a whole nother video about that in itself. But again, remember, it's not what you say happened. It is what is documented and what you can prove. But you want to make sure that you're doing things physically and mentally to protect your well-being when it comes to dealing with these jobs, okay? Now, let's get into what I think actually has led to MrBeast having a toxic and hostile work environment in the first place. And I kind of already touched on this a little bit in the beginning when I talked about how MrBeast, you know, started out as just like this YouTuber creating content, having fun, to being transformed into a full-blown on corporation and business entity. And I think with that transition, because you have someone who didn't have business experience, it led to having poor leadership skills, right? Everyone is not meant to be an entrepreneur. And this is a conversation that I have with people all the time. Is on social media, you see so much messaging and so much content about quit your 9 to 5 and be an entrepreneur, like start a YouTube channel, be an influencer, get paid to travel. There's so much messaging out there that makes it seem like entrepreneurship is so easy, and it is not. This landscape is crazy. You have to learn people skills. You have to have leadership skills, business skills. You have to know how to manage business operations. You have to learn how to build systems and processes so that everything runs smoothly. You have to learn how to manage people so that you give them the right tools and resources to do their jobs. There's so many moving parts that goes into managing a business, however big or small it is. And the reason why a lot of entrepreneurs fail or struggle to even build brands like MrBeast is because they don't have those skill sets. And then also something else that you have to consider is just luck and privilege, right? So sometimes you can get to the MrBeast level off of pure luck and privilege that thrusts you into that position, but you still don't necessarily have the knowledge and the skills to be effective at what it is that you do. Now, something else that I think has led to MrBeast being in this situation is obviously got to be the unrealistic expectations. So 𝗥𝗘𝗦𝗢𝗡 talked in his video a little bit about the employee handbook and manual, and he gave an example of like no doesn't mean no. And so because this is kind of the principles that MrBeast has built his brand on, this is going to trickle down and foster into the company culture that has been created from the top of the company on down. And this is something that I have to have conversations with my clients about all the time, is that the company culture starts at the top. So you as the CEO, the C-suite executive, you set the tone for everything else. You set the tone, even if you have managers and supervisors in between you and other employees, you set the tone for how managers are going to create the employees beneath them. You set the tone for the professionalism or lack thereof that exists within the workplace. If you're constantly treating employees like your besties and your friends and you're joking around with them about inappropriate things, then they feel like they can do that too. If you're a C-suite executive and you're dating the intern, and the other employees are going to feel like, you know what, little Susie over there looking pretty good, let me go holler at Susie. Well, MrBeast is talking to so-and-so, so like, why I can't talk to Susie, right? So you set the tone with how you show up, the code of conduct that you have in place, the professionalism that you demonstrate, not only what is written on paper, right, but what you actually demonstrate in the workplace. And so one of the best books, even as an employee, but definitely if you're in a supervisory position, you're a manager, you're a leader within an organization or your company, the best book that you can read is a book by John C. Maxwell called Leadership 101. There's like a thick version, but then there's like a mini short version that's probably literally this thick. So I would read the book Leadership 101. It has great stories, examples, and just like founding principles for how to be good at leadership and managing people. But just a helpful recommendation, right? Something else that I would say has led to the hostile work environment for the MrBeast brand is just having poor working conditions. I think in all of these videos, people have talked about working long hours. The one guy talked about being locked away with the lights being on. Even 𝗙𝗏 talked about how he was there to, you know, midnight working on this, and not even as an employee. Like, this is with potentially even getting a job opportunity. So that in itself would have been a red flag for me. Like, I don't even work here, and you got me out here at midnight talking about some video concepts. It's a no for me. But those are things that you want to pay attention to. You want to make sure that you have good, healthy working conditions for your employees that foster teamwork and collaboration. And that also leads me to another thing. So I think Ty mentioned this in his video, and it was also mentioned, I want to say, in a one of the articles, it may have been the Yahoo News one, where it talked in Ty's video, he mentioned specifically how you could be like a C1 one day, and then the next day you could be bumped down to a C3, or vice versa. You could be a C3 and then get bumped to a C1. And so when you're in an environment like that, where you don't have job security, you don't know if you're going to have your job day to day, the employees typically tend to walk on eggshells, and they can't be comfortable and really like set and take ownership and accountability of their roles, because they're so worried about just being in that role the next day. Versus if you have a healthy work environment where people feel valued, they feel they get recognized, and they enjoy the work environment that they are in, then you tend to organically foster teamwork and collaboration. People tend to show up as their best selves and produce the most creativity and the best work and concepts, right? And this is something I have a lot of conversations with when I do consulting for big corporations. So don't want to share this story. Let me give an example without being specific. So sometimes companies will hire me to come in and do consulting because they have problems or issues going on in one particular department. So for example, a company may call me and be like, hey, like, we have a lot of employee turnover going on in our mailroom. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Everyone's bickering and fighting. Employees are always late, and we need to kind of shift the culture down there and get everyone back on track. And so I'll go into these departments, and typically the higher ups, the people in the C-suite, the managers, oh, people just behave this way because they don't get paid that much money. And I'm like, that is most likely not the problem. Yes, being paid a low wage can add to your frustration with a position, but typically when you get hired for a job, you know exactly how much money you're getting paid per hour or per month, per week, however your pay is set up. But when it becomes like, this ain't enough money for that, is when you get into your role and you realize all the other things, the office politics and things, the favoritism, the lack of structure that's going on, where people start to reconsider the value of that job, right? So they may have said, oh, I'm going to be making $15 an hour. That pay ain't all that great, but whatever, I need a job. But when they start working and now they're doing that job for $15 an hour, you got Susie over here who's always nagging and in other people's business, being nosy, spreading gossip. And you have this person who's always late or taking smoke breaks. And when they're not in their seat, you got to cover their workload. And then you have this micromanaging manager that's always coming in here asking you questions, checking on you, monitoring you from 1 minute to the next minute. And you have to deal with all these other things. You're like, all this ain't worth $15 an hour, right? So then you start to reassess the value based on all the other things that are happening, all the other things that are now factored into the fact that you're only paying me $15 an hour. So typically top level managers will be like, oh, it's just the pay. People don't like the pay. But when I go in, I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's not just the pay. Like, there's something else going on. And when you actually start to talk to employees, then you realize there's favoritism. Then you realize there's no trust because people are backstabbing and gossiping. You realize that managers are being micromanagers, right? And there's all these other layers that impact and cause the high turnover, cause the low employee morale. Sorry, y'all. Listen, I can talk about HR stuff. I can talk about business operations processes all day long. So I get excited. I'm passionate about this. I know I'm like off tangent, but I want to get back on track. I pretty much think I went over everything I wanted to say about the things that I think have caused MrBeast to be in this place where he is someone, the MrBeast brand has a toxic work environment. But now what I want to do is just kind of talk about how you prevent this work culture from becoming a part of the workplace, and then things that I think that MrBeast could probably do differently or should have done differently if he wanted to combat a hostile work environment and all these allegations that are out there. So number one is, if you want to have a healthy, well-rounded company culture and work environment, it starts with having an open communication policy and fostering open communication. And one of the biggest things that I think that has negatively impacted the MrBeast brand is the fact that people don't feel comfortable speaking up. People feel like if they make a mistake, they can lose their job status can be downgraded, they won't be able to participate in these different competitions or video concepts. And so because of that, people don't feel like they can fully show up to work and be authentic, be themselves. If you want to have a company culture that really is inclusive and collaborative, and in MrBeast's case, you want to have a creativity environment, right, where people can thrive on creativity, you need to foster open communication. This is why even within your own company that you work for, when you go through your orientation process, most companies will probably tell you like, hey, we have an open door policy, right? And you're like, why are you telling me this? What does that mean? And that is just a way of, on paper, making it feel inclusive for employees to be able to speak up, communicate issues or problems and concerns. Now, I will say that that is on paper. Not all companies actually incorporate this and manifest this into the actual company culture. It's just on paper. But if you want to have a thriving work culture, this has to be a practice that is not only on paper, but something that is a practice in real life. In addition to fostering an open communication, having open door policies, you also have to set clear expectations. And I don't know if with the MrBeast brand, they have job descriptions, they have roles and responsibilities outlined and things like that. But that is something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't have in place that they should have in place. Typically, when I do operational audits for different brands and companies, this is one of the main things that I tell them. You need job descriptions. Everyone should have a job description, and everyone should have a copy of that job description that outlines a summary of their role, their position, what their pay is, what their roles are, what their responsibilities are, so they know what the expectations are. And you also need to have SOPs. You should have standard operating procedures for any task that has to be done repetitively within the company. And this in itself resolves so many issues within organizations. Just having clear job descriptions, expectations, and SOPs for how to do those jobs, okay? In addition to this, something else that you can do to really foster an inclusive work environment is by having different mechanisms to recognize and reward employees for good things. So it sounds like in the MrBeast brand, typically people are only recognized in a negatively way when they do something wrong, or unless you're in a challenge, right? When you're in a challenge, you could win tons of money for participating in doing those challenge initiatives, which is why so many people do them for the money. But when it comes to the company culture, you want to include a regular company culture of recognizing employees for when they do good things. Typically, most companies only point people out when they're doing something bad, when they have a behavior issue, when there's a performance issue. But when you do that, that's going to create a very hostile work environment. So you need to balance that out with positivity. Reward employees for, a year of perfect attendance and not having any absences. Reward employees when they hit certain metrics or reach certain milestones, their 5th anniversary, 10th year anniversary, when they help the company make a specific amount of money, right? When you have these type of programs in place, you're going to naturally foster and boost employee morale, the culture within the workplace. People can take more pride in the jobs that they're doing, and it naturally makes them want to take on more ownership, more agency, and perform well, not only for themselves, but for the company as a whole. And last but not least, if you want to foster a great working environment, the best thing that you can do to set your employees up for success is to have some type of employee training and development programs. So that can include everything from having an employee onboarding process, employee orientation, where you teach them about the company's core principles and values, the company work culture, the expectations. You tell them about the company's history, their expectations. You orientate them into their role. You help train them on their job roles and responsibilities. You just don't throw them in there and then expect them to learn on their own. In addition to that, you also have training available for managers and supervisors, leaders. You just don't throw them into management roles with no management experience and expect them to be able to manage well, right? Send them to a management class or workshop so they can learn how to effectively manage people, how to manage employees with different working styles, right? How to give positive feedback, how to maintain or manage employee performance, do performance evaluations. So the more tools and resources that you can provide to your employees, the better the work environment and company culture is going to be. Now, I have said a lot in this video. To sum it up, I just want to kind of wrap this up and say that as if MrBeast is going to watch this video, right? But if I could give any advice to MrBeast, I would want him to know that in order to be a great leader, you have to create a work culture where people feel valued, where people feel empowered, and they're able to thrive in their environment, and they can really like showcase their best skill sets when it comes to showing up and performing in their role. Moving forward, I think the best thing that MrBeast can do is try to just take responsibility, take ownership of the current state of the company. And if he is not in a capacity to lead from the top, then maybe he needs to step down and bring someone else in who can, and really try to take action and create initiatives that can really transform the company environment and culture that has been built on the no doesn't mean no principles, right? And really shift the narrative to make it to where it's more compassionate, it's more humanized, and people feel like, you know, employees and humans and not workhorses who are underappreciated and undervalued. So if you made it all the way to the end of this video, oh my God, thank you so much. I typically don't do videos on hot topics like this because I don't like the energy that it brings. But again, I am passionate about talking about human resources, business operations. So if you're into that type of thing, you made it this far in the video, give this video a like, consider subscribing to my channel. I talk about other topics about, you know, creating client management processes. I review different tech tools and systems that can help entrepreneurs when it comes to streamlining their business operations in the digital world. So if you're into that type of thing, make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications so you'll be notified anytime I upload videos on all those amazing topics. Again, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video, stopping by my internet home. Bye guys.